So I would suggest to all our local governments out there, if you're looking for a way to make ends meet with these new adjusted numbers there, don't go to your police and fire, go to your taxpayer-funded lobbyist.
Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagan, and welcome to another fun-filled, action-packed episode of Iowa's favorite conservative podcast. I'm here today with Chris and John, ready to entertain you for the next 20-some minutes. This is at least the 6th or 7th try that we've had today to get this actually running.
Is it working this time?
I think so. I've restarted the computer. I think we've clicked record and delete several times here, and yeah.
I'm kind of feeling like former President Bush, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, and then he couldn't really land the plane on that, but you see where we're going with this, Chris.
It's all part of my secret plan to get my next equipment request approved.
Okay. If you just frustrate us enough, we will give in and say, yes, go buy the new thing.
Okay, well fantastic. So we heard at the outset some comments from State Senator Dan Dawson, who's the chairman of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, as he was running Senate File 181, which we talked about in the last podcast, which was is the fix for the multi-residential / residential rollback fixed. And he had some comments about taxpayer-funded lobbyists. So if for a little bit of refresher, this bill would remedy an error in how the residential rollback is calculated, and without going back into it again, saves residential taxpayers from being overtaxed. So you would see a direct savings on next year's tax bill if this bill passes. Is that close?
That's a fair summary.
Very high level. Well, and as Senator Dawson pointed out, there was an army of lobbyists and representatives from local governments there fighting against this bill. And as Senator Dawson pointed out, don't tell me that you're going to cut police and fire if we pass this bill. Why don't you start with your taxpayer-funded lobbyists? And he was pretty fired up about that, so I wanted to start things off with that.
Both of our organizations have written about taxpayer-funded lobbying, and of course, as our listeners know by now, both organizations' websites hold those articles. But he sure made that point a lot more succinctly than we did, and probably more effectively.
Yeah.
So thanks, Senator Dawson, for sticking up for the taxpayer.
And there's a reason he's doing it on the floor of the state Senate. We're doing it in the conference room at the
6 or 7 takes at a time.
Yes, exactly. He got it in one. It's amazing. Just a kind of a state of play on that bill before we move on to some, frankly, even more exciting Senator Dawson stuff from this week. But so that bill would save residential property taxpayers money. And the local governments don't like it because they'd rather spend that money. Right?
Yes.
So there was the minority offered an amendment to have the state backfill that money to the tune of $130 million, that they would rather have the state taxpayers
pay for the spending desires of local governments.
And it cannot be reinforced enough. This is not about cutting local government. It is reducing the amount of money that they get from increased assessments. Their budgets will still grow next year, still grow by quite a bit next year.
Just not as much as they wanted them to.
Just not as much as they want. And frankly, I would encourage them not to, but they could even still actually raise their levy rate if they really need to spend that much money. But immediately, in typical fashion, the scare tactic comes out right out of the gate. If you do this, we're going to have less policemen out on the streets, which is just...
It's not true.
It's not true because...
But also remember, folks, state law requires them to provide that service.
Right.
They don't have a choice but to put public safety out there. So not only is it a bad scare tactic, it is not even true.
It's not even true. And we've heard it all. If this error had not happened, they would have just gotten the normal amount. This is just taking them back to the normal increased amount. And so the scare tactics are less police and fire or bond rating or all the usual greatest hits that come out of local government every time you threaten their steady supply of property taxpayer money. And kudos to the state Senate for seeing through that.
Chris, now I understand the amendment to use state dollars to backfill these spending desires, that failed. So
Yes.
with no amendment and just let's get the calculation correct, let's leave a little less taxable value for local governments to get. How did that vote go in the Senate?
The clean bill with no backfill was unanimous in the state Senate.
So bipartisan support to fix the issue and,
Right.
and give property taxpayers a little extra protection.
And I think it shows just how important the issue is.
Yeah.
Is that everyone in that chamber understood they needed to be on the side of the taxpayer in this battle at once it was all said and done. So the bill's over in the House now for consideration, and we're hopeful that they will act in the same way. We need no more backfills.
Right.
It took us a decade to get out of this last big one on the commercial tax bill from 10 years ago, but the state does not need to be cutting a check to local government. Local government needs to spend less.
Well, I might add this: the state's already cuts a fair amount of checks to local governments for other backfills. We do it for economic development activities and other things. And so let's get out of the business of the state taxpayer subsidizing local government.
I agree. John, you want to keep cutting checks to local government?
No.
I know how fiery you get about local government.
Yeah.
You're checked out. I want to preview, though, something that I know that you guys in the foundation are working on, though. And we'll see more information coming out on this hopefully soon. I'm putting you on the spot, not just an equipment request, but future published content here.
Oh, okay.
But cities and counties in Iowa are sitting on a lot of their own surplus funds. That's the little secret they're not telling you here.
They are.
More than they need. And why in the world, if they do need a bailout, which I would strongly say they do not, why in the world do they need the state to pick up the tab when they can't pay it themselves? Correct?
That's correct. And we hope to be able to give just an explanation of what those sort of reserve funds or excess dollars are, and give a snapshot of quite a few communities around the state, and just sort of show you where they're sitting with their what's considered unassigned funds.
Yep. Well, we'll come back and spend some more time on that next week. So moving on to other news coming out this week.
Just a little thing.
Yeah,
also from Senator Dawson.
So by way of background, John, we're Iowans for tax relief, and we like tax cuts, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But the mission of this organization is, it's many things, but at our core, in our DNA, is reductions in the individual income tax in Iowa. So Senator Dawson offered an individual income tax bill this week. What was it? Senate File 126. I'm going to let you talk about what Senator Dawson has proposed.
Yeah, this was a very exciting bill. And basically what it does is it continues the tax reform that was passed last year. And of course, as we know, we've talked about that quite extensively. It creates a 3.9% flat tax by 2026. But what Senator Dawson has introduced and proposed is basically continuing that, placing the individual income tax on a path to elimination, and basically by 2028, if his plan is enacted, I would have a 2.5% flat tax, which would tie us with.
So the sort of first stop on the road to elimination is taking us from 3.9 to what'd you say, 2.5?
Well, there's some other stages. So it'd go. If we want to back up, by 2025, it would go to flat 4%, and then.
I'm sorry to interrupt. That would be, in addition to going to a lower rate in the out years, is an acceleration of the bill that we passed last year.
Yes, This accelerates and not just that, but it continues the bill that they passed last year. So basically, if it was enacted by 2028, we'd have a 2.5% flat tax, and so. And then the other thing, what does, which I really like, is it basically takes the taxpayer relief fund, which is expected to grow to over $3 billion by the end of fiscal year 2023, and even more so in fiscal year 2024, based on projections now. It takes a taxpayer relief fund, and they change the name to the Individual Income Tax Elimination Fund. And
that's even better than just tax relief, it's tax elimination.
Well, that's exactly right. And
Fantastic.
so what it does is actually what Senator Dawson is doing is taking that fund and using it for its intended purpose. And so once we hit 2028 and that 2.5%, the individual income tax will then be slowly phased out until it's eliminated based upon the taxpayer dollars that have gone into the what would then become the individual income tax elimination fund. So right now, as you both were talking about, there's a lot of temptation by policymakers. They're looking at, gee, we have a lot of money sitting in the taxpayer relief fund. Why can't we use that for backfill? Why can't we use that for some other purposes? Why can't we use that to support more education funding? Well, that's not the purpose of that fund. That fund was created for income tax relief, and Senator Dawson's going to use that for its intended purpose to eliminate the income tax. The other thing he does in the bill, which I think is very good, is he speeds up the corporate rate reduction. Currently, there's a calculation that anything over corporate revenues over $700 million goes to rate reduction, and we've seen that happen this year. We went from 9.8 to 8.4. Senator Dawson wants to lower that threshold from $700 million to, I believe it's $680 million, and then work the rate down till it gets to 4.75%. Which I think that's a very good thing to do.
And that's lower than the existing sort of target, right?
Yes, yeah. The current target is 5.5% of flat.
So to summarize these things, John, he would like us to speed up the cuts that are already planned and in place, and then take us to additionally lower rates for both personal and corporate. Yeah, and the real sweet spot is in the personal, even creating a path to total elimination.
That's right? Exactly right. Yeah. So this is a very good plan. It's a responsible plan. Like I said, it's using the taxpayer relief fund as it was intended to be used. And one thing is that I think Senator Dawson, certainly Majority Leader Whitver, and the governor understand that Iowa cannot be complacent. And even this is incredible, but 43 states in the last 2 years have enacted tax reforms. And, Iowa's concerned about bringing people here, bringing jobs here. And the greatest competition we have is with 49 other states for people and jobs. And what we're seeing right now is other states, our neighbors in Nebraska, they're considering a 3.9% flat tax. Our neighbors in Wisconsin are considering a flat tax, although it's going to be an uphill battle for them because they have a very liberal, progressive governor. And we even see states like Arkansas, where their new governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who will be delivering the response to President Biden's State of the Union here next week, she is pushing for putting their income tax on a path to elimination. Even North Carolina, which has been for a long time what I would consider the gold standard for state tax reform, has basically said, my goodness, we've got to catch up. And they're considering further income tax reform as well to get to a lower rate because all these states are competing. So I really hope that this Senate bill that Senator Dawson has done gets serious consideration because Iowa's in a very good position right now to do these tax reforms, and our revenues are continuing to look good, and I think this is just a responsible way for us to remain very competitive and become even a stronger leader in tax reform. Because even last year, our tax bill was probably the most comprehensive in the nation. We led on tax reform with that, and what was called the state flat tax revolution. So this is a very exciting bill that was introduced.
John, when does Iowa become the gold standard for tax reform?
Well, I think we're close.
I mean, and I'm not even talking about where we're at the destination, which is great, especially with that bill, but just everything that we have done in the state. I would hold out the progress that we've made as better than anyone's.
Yes, yeah, we we certainly, like I said, we've a lot of people have given Iowa credit, Iowa deserves credit for the tax reform they did last year, because it, like I said, it was the most extensive in the nation. We led on the states going to a flat tax system. One thing is that I think one thing I always like North Carolina is because they're doing what Senator Dawson is trying to do here. Is that North Carolina just didn't? They have not just stopped.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing in Iowa that we need to be careful for, is we need to continue this, and we need to be careful. And so the groundwork has been laid. We need to continue the responsible budgeting. The governor has had a really good, basically a streamlining bill that's going to be coming out, or has come out, that's going to consolidate agencies. They'll save well over $200 million for taxpayers. So, going back to local governments, it's time for local governments to follow what the state has been doing. Start consolidating, just like the governor is doing, and start pruning back the budget. You can certainly do that. It's not necessarily a fun thing to do, but as you can see,
well, it's fun for us.
But taxpayers are winning, at least at the state level, because of the fiscal conservative policies of the governor, and really because the Senate. I mean, it's really the Senate that's really taking this seriously, and the governor. So I really, this is a great bill.
That's great. I guess I don't have anything else to add on that. I do want to go back a little bit to the Taxpayer Relief Fund, which Senator Dawson which rolls off the tongue, the individual income tax elimination fund, which we will absolutely have roll off of our tongue here after we work on this for a while. But you're right, John. And I hear legislators across the board hinting around, well, maybe we should pull a little bit of that back for a certain project or a certain spending. That fund is for tax relief, and it's not for spending, and it's not for tax cuts, property tax cuts at the local level, for providing backfills or
Chris, were you in office when that was created?
Yes, I was there when it was the Taxpayer Trust Fund.
But the whole idea was, when we brought in more money than we needed, that would be taken off the table. Is to get it out of the hand of the spenders and give it create a mechanism to get that money ultimately back to the taxpayer.
It represents the over collection of taxes, which has been the foundation for all of these tax bills, is that Iowans are paying too much. They're paying more in taxes than the state needs in order to operate. And it's a model that I wish there was a way we could implement at the local level, is that we work through the state budget. At the end of the year, you fill up the reserve funds, the economic emergency fund, and all of those things. And then whatever is left over is an amount that taxpayers should not have had to pay. And so we'll set that aside and use that as the foundation for future tax relief. And that has been the case for 10 years. And so rename it that and put a mechanism around that to actually have it work towards its intended purpose. Because that fund, as you point out, John, continues to grow. Mm-hmm. And as that pot of money sits there, it starts looking real good for the folks that want to spend it or use it for some other purpose. It's for tax relief at the state level, and that's where it should go.
One point I want to just bring up about the local government issue is I think one mistake that people tend to forget is they think, well, why can't we just have the state buy down property taxes? And
the state has tried that multiple times, and it is always worth considering.
But it's the danger there is, and other states have failed at this, and certainly we have with a backfill. But if you don't have proper restraints on local government spending, they're just going to keep on doing the same thing.
Whatever savings you generate right now, and it may last for a few years, but eventually those local government budgets will grow right back to where they were before you delivered relief.
Absolutely right.
And off they go, unimpeded, and the state's picking up part of the tab. And so we can always consider those types of reforms, but they're usually kind of short-lived in their effectiveness.
Oh, they're not even worth considering.
John, you made the point that local government needs to follow the state's example. It's not up to the state to backfill it and fund it. Local government needs to learn to do less with more, and live within their means and stop over collecting from Iowans. And they got to figure that out. And it should absolutely not be the state legislature further enabling that by cutting them checks, because they will continue to spend. They'll continue to spend more. It has to start with spending restraint. That is the foundation for any of this.
That's right.
So it's a two-pronged reason why backfilling that is a bad idea. One, it's not the state's responsibility. That money should go towards tax relief at the state level. And two, it's just enables them to keep going, and that has to stop. So we're actually running up on time. I did want to talk a little bit about Senator Dawson had a property tax bill
and a sales tax bill.
Yeah,
That's right. He was busy this week.
Yeah, in property taxes, which is sometimes more difficult to work through than individual income tax, especially now that we have a flat tax. It's pretty much just shaving points off.
There you go.
But Senator Dawson has a bill which consolidates some levies, an ITR issue which is ratcheting down the levy rate as valuations increase, and lease purchase agreements, kind of limiting some of those developer incentives and things that local governments can do on that. And so there's a lot of good stuff in there. I think we'll maybe dive into that a little deeper on a future episode, but I didn't want to ignore that was there, and it's a meaningful bill.
Look, anytime you talk an actual plan for income tax elimination, that's where we're going to focus, our time and our energy.
Right.
But the other bills he's introduced this week are important, and certainly some of the property tax reforms in Senator Dawson's bill that you just talked about certainly completely aligned with the spirit of the things that we've suggested, from the foundation or from you and your team at ITR, Chris.
Yep.
So
great.
All looks really good going forward.
Well, good. It's a happy Friday here on the ITR Live podcast.
Yes,
it is. Yeah.
Happy
John,
Friday indeed.
Yeah. You smiled from beginning to end.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Well, we are out of time. So thank you for joining us. Stay warm out there. Spring is coming. I don't care what the groundhog said. And we've got a lot more to say coming up. So tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your colleagues about the podcast. Get them signed up at taxrelief.org or itrfoundation.org. And you can come on along and join in the fun here of honoring taxpayers and limiting government and getting them out of your way. And I always stumble across the lingo, but out of your wallet and off your back.
Yes,
that's what we're trying to do.
Yes.
Here.
This is a pro-business program too.
That's right. That's right. And we're pro-trade policy too. We got all kinds of stuff. We got so much good stuff for you. But anyway,
that's another episode.
It is. Well, it's been several other episodes, and I somehow suspect it will be again in the future. So, gentlemen, thank you. That's all the time we have. And with that, we will see you next time.